Today, the topic of our discussion is on the spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. So, what you understand by spontaneous bacterial peritonitis? We will talk about the definition, the clinical features, investigations, treatment, and the prophylaxis in the high-risk patients. Okay, so let us see what you understand by spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. In spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, these patients, okay, so these SBPs, actually they already have ascites. Okay, so maybe due to cirrhosis of liver or due to some other reasons, they already have developed ascites. But if when this ascitic fluid, it becomes infected. Okay, so when the ascitic fluid becomes infected, okay, so the infected ascitic fluid, but again you have to be very careful that if the ascitic fluid has become infected, but that is in the absence of a recognizable secondary cause of peritonitis. This means that like if there is some visible, like if there is some known cause of infection, any intra-abdominal infection, like any intestinal perforation or abscess, okay, so that has to be excluded out, okay, in the absence of any intra-abdominal source of infection. Okay, in the absence of any recognizable secondary source of peritonitis. Like if there is a secondary, you know that okay, there has been an organ perforation, okay, so or there has been a abscess due to which this ascitic fluid has got infected, so that won't come under spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. When you're using this term spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, this implies the infected ascitic fluid in the absence of any intra-abdominal infection or in the absence of any recognizable secondary cause of peritonitis. Okay, so this is the proper definition of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Then you can think that okay, if we are excluding these causes, that any intra-abdominal infection and these things are excluded out, then what is the reason? What is the reason for this infection of this infected ascitic fluid? Remember, the majority of the cases, the reason of this spontaneous bacterial peritonitis is the organisms of the normal flora of the intestine. Okay, so this is mainly, it is caused by the normal flora. Okay, so the normal flora of the intestine. So what happens is that there is this translocation of this, this bacteria from the gut into the ascitic fluid, and it causes the infection of the ascitic fluid. Remember the normal flora of the gut, the normal flora of the intestine, there is translocation of this normal bacteria from the intestine, and it infects the ascitic fluid. Okay, and mainly the organisms like E. coli. For maximum of the cases, it is E. coli which is responsible. Okay, so apart from E. coli, maximum cases you will find of E. coli infection, in E. coli infecting the ascitic fluid. Apart from E. coli is the more maximum one. Apart from that, you have also got other organisms like Streptococcus. Okay, then you have got Enterococcus. So these are some other infections also which can occur. Okay. Okay, so this is about the case of your spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Okay, so remember, it has been seen that a number of other abnormalities are also identified, which is contributing to this infection. Okay, so what other abnormalities can contribute to this infection? Okay, so before coming to the etiology portion, let me just tell you the clinical features first, then I shall come to the etiology portion. Okay, so what is the first, as I told you, the normal flora of the gut. Okay, so the translocation of this bacteria from the gut. Okay, so we'll come to the rest of the etiology. First, we'll just discuss a bit about the clinical features. So how does the patient present to us? Actually, in this patient, suddenly, there will be an abrupt onset of fever, chills, abdominal pain, rebound tenderness. Okay, so these are the presentation. There is abrupt onset, or this patient who has already, he or she had already ascites, and he was a cirrhotic patient, and you find that suddenly there is a worsening in his condition, or the patient has developed hepatic encephalopathy. Okay, so abrupt worsening or hepatic encephalopathy in a cirrhotic patient with ascites. right? Suddenly you got it. So already the patient had ascites, okay, due to some problem, the liver, like cirrhosis or something. But suddenly you saw that that patient has abruptly, his condition has started worsening, and he has developed hepatic encephalopathy, or suddenly he has developed fever, and there is abdominal pain and rebound tenderness. Okay, so these are some of the clinical features which you find. Okay, so what other clinical features will you find in these patients is that, some of these patients, okay, so who develop these spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, they will also present to you with some other features also. In these cases, you have to immediately do a diagnostic paracentesis. Like, for these are the normal things which you see. Apart from this, you'll suddenly see that the patient had developed ascites, plus he has also started developing GI bleed. Okay, so GI bleeding, shock, fever, I have already told you. Okay, so worsening liver function. Suddenly his liver function has started worsening. Okay, worsening liver function, worsening renal function, right? And as I told you, hepatic encephalopathy. Okay, so these are some of the features when you find in the patient, we immediately go for a diagnostic paracentesis. What will we do by doing this diagnostic paracentesis? We'll study the nature of the ascitic fluid. Okay, so whether, we'll do the culture. If the culture comes out to be positive, if E. coli or streptococcus or enterococcus is present in it, and what is the leukocyte count. Okay, because if there is infection, the leukocyte count will be more. For all these reasons, we do the diagnostic paracentesis. Okay, so these are some of the clinical features this patient can present to you with, as told, fever, abdominal pain, rebound tenderness. Okay, suddenly the condition is worsening, or hepatic encephalopathy has developed. Suddenly the patient has started developed the GI bleeding, or worsening of liver renal function. So these are certain conditions where we usually go for a diagnostic paracentesis, because there is a strong suspicion of SBP, or spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Okay. Okay, so next let us come to the etiology portion. Etiology portion already we have discussed. That is, as I told you, the translocation of bacteria from the gut. Okay, so most common is your E. coli, GI bleeding. Apart from that, okay, so anything like if by which the our body's immunity, there is a failure of the immune system, like, if there is any leukocyte dysfunction, or if there are decreased antibodies, or there are excess amount of immunosuppressive cytokines. Okay, the immunosuppressive cytokines have increased, antibodies have decreased. Okay, so all these things, due to which there is a failure of our immune system, because if our immune system is active, it will kill these virulent bacteria, okay, so which have escaped from the gut. Okay, so but if our immune system is not active, if there is a failure of the immune system, it is not able to kill this virulent bacteria, then it can cause the infection in the ascitic fluid, and it can cause spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Okay, what else? There are certain invasive procedures also. Okay, so invasive procedures, they can also cause, like, endoscopy or tips. Okay, so, or there are any indwelling catheters, venous catheters, urinary catheters. Okay, so they are also the sources of infection. Clear? Okay. Next, this is about the etiology portion. Okay. Next, let us come to, first you understood. So, what is the cause? What is the bacterial peritonitis? Okay, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. And then we saw, what do you understand by the definition of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. We saw the causes, and we saw the clinical features. Next, let us come to the investigation. How are you going to investigate? So next, let us come to the investigation. Okay, so investigation, as I just told you, so these investigations are to be done in which patient? In which we have a strong suspicion of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Okay, so we perform a diagnostic paracentesis. DIA. Okay, so diagnostic paracentesis. In which patients, as I have already told you, what are the clinical features wherever we suspect it. Okay, so like already the patient has ascites and cirrhosis, and there is a sudden worsening. Okay, there is abrupt onset of fever, rebound tenderness, and abdominal pain. Okay, and there is a worsening, of the renal functions, or there is hepatic encephalopathy, GI bleeding. So in these cases, we carry out the diagnostic paracentesis. And when we carry out the diagnostic paracentesis, if we find these features are present, okay, so these are much in favor of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. So let us see what are the different features which we find. So first we'll find the nature, when the ascitic fluid, the characteristics. That is, we'll find it's a cloudy fluid. The ascitic fluid, it's cloudy, and the leukocyte count. Leukocytosis is a very important indicator. Okay, so leukocyte count usually it is more than 500 per millimeter cube. Okay, so leukocyte count is high. Okay, so the polymorphs count, that is more than 250 per mm cube. Okay, so the pH, that is less than 7.3. Culture is positive when we do the culture of the ascitic fluid. Don't get confused. This is not blood culture. This is culture of the ascitic fluid. Okay, so that is positive. E. coli or Streptococcus. Obviously, E. coli is the most common organism which we find. Apart from that, we can also find Streptococcus or Enterococcus. Okay, so these are the things which we are going to notice in the ascitic fluid. What else you can see? Ascites in ascitic fluid, if we measure the lactate levels, that also, if it comes more than 25 mg per dl, this also carries a high suspicion. Okay, so let us see. Remember one thing, that the combination, these two things, yes, the combination, when we do the diagnostic paracentesis and when we look for these parameters, the leukocyte count, polymorph count, pH, culture, out of these, if the pH, this point, okay, pH less than 7.3, okay, and this leukocyte count more than 500, okay, more than 500 cells per mm cube. Okay, so these two parameters, if these two parameters you find that the pH will also come less than 7.3, leukocyte count is more than 500 cells per mm cube, or polymorphs more than 200 cells per mm cube, these two features, this gives us a sensitivity of, it gives us nearly 100% sensitive and 96% specific. Sensitivity and specificity of 100% and 96% respectively, these two parameters. Clear? And right, so these two things to remember. And there are several other studies, several other retrospective studies where it has shown that this ascites lactate levels more than 25 mg per dl, this has also shown 100% a sensitivity and specificity in predicting the active spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. This has been seen in many retrospective analysis. Okay, so these are some of the features. And talking about blood culture may not always be positive. Blood culture is positive only in 33% of the cases. So in these cases, you should not rely on the blood culture. You should mainly rely on the ascitic fluid culture. Okay, so this is the investigation which you need to do. The blood, in the blood also you'll find leukocytosis. In the ascitic fluid, you will find all these things, right? So lactate levels are high, and this is about the investigation. Okay, so after the investigation, let us come to the complication. Remember, early diagnosis of SBP is very important, because if SBP is not diagnosed early, it carries a high mortality if you don't diagnose it early. Okay, so there is a complication. In fact, the most severe complication of SBP is hepatorenal syndrome. Remember, hepatorenal syndrome, this is the most serious complication. Okay, so this occurs in 30% of the patient, and if this occurs, then this hepatorenal syndrome, it carries a high mortality rate. Right, and even one more complication is there, like even after treatment, like if it has resolved, okay, after resolution also, there is a high chance that SBP may reoccur. Okay, and it has been seen that there is a 70% probability of reoccurrence within 1 year. So this rate of recurrence of SBP, rate of recurrence of SBP is also very high, and the most, the severe complication of SBP is hepatorenal syndrome. Right? Okay. Next, let us come to the treatment. So, what is the treatment? See, treatment, a minimum duration. Okay, so remember a minimum duration of 5 days treatment, and that also orally or parenterally. We have to give it parenterally. Which drug are we supposed to give it? Which most effective drug? That is a third generation. Do you remember any third generation cephalosporins? Remember the classification of cephalosporins: first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation. So a third generation cephalosporin, out of which the most effective one is cefotaxime. What is the dose? How do we give it? 2 grams 12 hourly. Okay, so this drug can be given parenteral route, minimum duration of 5 days. Okay, minimum duration of 5 days. Alternative therapy, what we can give apart if due to any reason the patient is not responding to cefotaxime or patient is not tolerating it. Okay, so then we can give another drug which is equally effective as cefotaxime. That is a combination of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid. Okay. Right. So this is also equally effective. And what is the dose? What we give it? Which we give it? We usually give it first. Both the see it's a bacterial peritonitis which has occurred. So obviously oral we will give, but first the dose is completed by the parenteral route, and then we give it by the oral route. Okay. So first we give it 1.2 grams 8 hourly. Okay, so this is given, and then it is switched to oral route. Okay, so first parenteral route, and then you can switch it to oral route. Anything else? Any other alternative therapy? These two are the most common drugs which is given: the cefotaxime and amoxicillin clavulanic acid. Apart from this, we also have got some alternative drugs like we have got ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin. Okay, certain the fluoroquinolone groups. That is, you have got the ciprofloxacin. These are the alternatives. Okay, ofloxacin. So ciprofloxacin, how do we give it? We give it 200 mg IV. I'll just tell you all the doses because it's very important. Okay, 200 mg IV 12 hourly. Then again, when you start it orally, what's the oral dose of ciprofloxacin? 500 mg BB. Okay, similarly, ofloxacin, how do we give it? First, we give it the same way we give it parenterally, and then we can switch to orally. 400 mg twice daily. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, and what else has to be given to these patients apart from giving these antibiotics? Cefotaxime, amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin. These are the different antibiotics. So apart from giving the antibiotics, okay, so we also give intravenous albumin. Remember, the first treatment which we start in a patient of since it's an infection has occurred, infected ascitic fluid. Obviously, first we have to give these antibiotics. After the two things which is always given in SBB, remember, antibiotics and albumin therapy. Antibiotic therapy and albumin therapy. Remember very well. Okay, so don't forget to write this albumin therapy. Okay, so albumin, this is also given. How it is given? It is given by the intravenous route. Okay, it is given by the intravenous route because it is often seen by giving this albumin. The dose also, let me write it down for you. It is 1.5 grams per kg body weight at diagnosis. Okay, and we give it 1 gram per kg 48 hours later. Okay, so this is initially given at diagnosis, and this is given 48 hours later. Right. So what is the benefit of this albumin therapy? It is seen that it significantly lowers the mortality, the hospital mortality. That is significantly lowered. The hospital mortality, 3-month mortality. There is lower rates of renal dysfunction. Okay, so all these benefits you get if we give the patient IV albumin also. Okay, so remember clearly that here we usually do two drugs are given, two things are given here. One is your antibiotics, second is IV albumin. Clear? So this is your treatment. In the treatment portion, one small portion, I'll tell you about the prophylaxis. Remember, since there are some groups of patients who are at high risk of developing a spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. In those high risk patients, we often advise prophylactic therapy. So first let us see which are the high risk patients. Okay, then we will talk which drugs are given as prophylaxis. So high risk patients are those Okay, it is indicated mainly in those patients who have a acute GI bleeding. Because just now I had told you that GI bleeding can also cause SBP, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. So patients with acute GI bleeding or acute GI hemorrhage, okay, patients with low protein count, okay, so whose protein count in the ascitic fluid, if you find that the protein count that is low, low means less than 1.5 grams per DL, okay, or in patients with advanced liver disease determined by the Child-Pugh score. Child-Pugh score of more than equal to 9, or bilirubin, more than equal to 3 mg per DL. Okay, or serum creatinine is more than equal to 1.2. So in these cases, advanced liver disease patients, okay, or in those patients who had a previous history of SBP, because just now I told you that there is a high chance of recurrence of SBP. Previous history of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Okay, so in these cases, what do we do is that we give them prophylactic drugs. So what prophylaxis is given? Remember the main drugs which are given for prophylaxis here. They are drugs given for prophylaxis. Cefotaxime was given for treatment also. It is given for prophylaxis also. And norfloxacin. This is belonging to the group of fluoroquinolones. Okay. So, but remember for prophylaxis, obviously, you don't need to give it by the parenteral route. We give it by the oral route. Clear? So cefotaxime or norfloxacin, okay, so these are given for the prophylaxis purposes. Okay, or you can give other drugs like, cotrimoxazole, other drugs are given, but these are the main drugs which is given for the prophylaxis. So I hope it's clear. What do you understand by SBP, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis? The infected ascitic fluid in the absence of a recognizable secondary cause of peritonitis, in the absence of any intra-abdominal infections. Etiology, mainly the translocation of bacteria from the gut. Okay, so there is impaired immune response, which is not able to kill those virulent bacteria, and the intestine, there is this translocation of bacteria from the gut, right? And if there is any GI bleeding, so these are all the etiology of SBP. Clinical features: patient already with pre-existing cirrhosis and ascites, suddenly there is an abrupt worsening in his condition, or there is hepatic encephalopathy, or there is worsening of the renal function, okay, or there is an abrupt onset of fever, abdominal tenderness, rebound tenderness, right? Then we came to the different investigation after seeing these clinical features. If we it's going in favor of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, we do certain investigations. Most important, we look at the leukocyte count, we look at the polymorph count, okay, we look at the what else, the ascitic fluid, the levels, okay, so the lactate levels, and we look at the what are the other important things I had told you. In this case, we look at the leukocyte levels, the pH level less than 7.3. Okay, so then I told you about the ascitic fluid, lactate levels. Okay, and blood culture, only 33% cases it is positive. So that is not a very reliable indicator. We do the culture of the ascitic fluid, where we often find the organism like E. coli or Streptococcus or Enterococcus, right? And then I told you about the treatment. The treatment, okay, that is mainly done with cefotaxime or amoxicillin clavulanic acid. First it is given by the IV route, and then we give it orally. Or there are alternative drugs also, like the fluoroquinolone group, like ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin. Then I told you about the prophylaxis, where it is given mainly in the high-risk patients. High-risk patients, like mainly those patients, with these patients in acute GI bleed or ascitic fluid protein content less than 1.5, advanced liver disease. Advanced liver disease means Child-Pugh score more than equal to 9. Okay, so bilirubin is more than equal to 3 mg per DL. Serum creatinine levels is more than equal to 1.2 mg per DL, or those who have already a previous history of SBP. Okay, so in these cases, we give primary prophylaxis in patients of previous history of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, since they have a high chance of recurrence in the first year. In these cases, we give the secondary prophylaxis. Okay. Okay, prophylaxis is mainly given with cefotaxime or fluoxetine. Other drugs are also there like utromoxazole. And for prophylaxis purpose, we mainly give them by the oral route. Okay, so this is all about your spontaneous bacterial peritonitis.